The story begins by introducing us to a beautiful waifu who was just waking up because of our protagonist named Wang, who did so because the company event had already started. And as the cute girl was really being very affectionate, he immediately pushes her away and asks her to behave because he has a girlfriend, and besides the celebration banquet. After a while, we see that they are going to recognize the hard work of the programmer who made a project at the company successful, and the presenter before everyone asks them to give a big applause to Mr. Lee. And we see that the waifu ends up getting angry because she did all the work. Our protagonist says to forget it because, as Alice the leader will take all the credit. He also says, noticing that his girlfriend had also woken up, and hears Lily mentioning to everyone present that they will get married very soon. And we see that our protagonist, shocked by her words, runs quickly to where they are and asks how she could do that without even telling him that they had broken up, and asks her to explain why she did it. The girl, who is a terrible person, tells him how he can compare himself to Mr. Lee, while he yells that she doesn't know he did all the work. Furious at such disrespect, he ends up pushing the stage, and because of that, the protagonist loses consciousness. But anyway, he hears a lot of hurtful comments being said about him, but suddenly he is saved by a beautiful waifu who turns out to be a goddess who gives him the power of a system and grants him the title of National Maria. And as a very nice person, she tells him not to worry anymore, that from now on he will no longer be unhappy and will live a great life. And quickly she ends up expelling him from the place so that he can start the show. And we see that our protagonist doesn't understand anything about what just happened, and suddenly a lot of girls are madly in love with him. The protagonist, not understanding any of what was happening, listens to the explanation that what happens is that the system gave him a title that makes him very handsome. He also wonders why he is now so handsome and gets angry with himself because he left a hunk like him for a toad, and runs towards the protagonist and begs him not to leave her and yells to everyone that Lisa took advantage of her subordinate's credit and also embezzled public funds. The girls who were crazy about the protagonist, angry, demand that they fire that dog Lee, who heard all this, whispers to her what she is doing, that she forgot she is his accomplice. She, who was mesmerized by the protagonist's beauty, says that from that moment on she is reformed. The guy couldn't believe what was happening when suddenly a beautiful waifu who was the company's president arrived and shouted for them to shut up. He tries to explain to her that it's a misunderstanding, but it's useless because she, very furious, chases her and tells her to go and firmly resign with her fiancé and leave immediately. Our protagonist, who didn't understand a thing about what had just happened, the waifu noticed his presence and was mesmerized when she approached and told him that she hadn't noticed he had such a handsome job. Even though she noticed that the president was flirting with him, she begs him to get back together. But Tito 1, as a self-respecting alpha male, tells her to get lost. Don, who saw such a scene, was hopelessly in love with such a bad boy and yells at him and Ali to get out of her company because they don't want them, having such unpleasant people around, and warns the others that if they steal the credit, they know what awaits them. With a serious expression, she asks our protagonist to accompany her for a while. We see that she takes him to a more private place, and when they finally arrive, we see one very embarrassed. Waifumia, or the success, whispers to him that she is scared, but she mentions that he hasn't received the reward he deserved for the great offense he received. She tells him to ask for whatever he wants, and our protagonist was aware that she would be the ideal woman for any man. And he starts to get nervous. Donkey notices this and tells him not to worry, that she will make him forget his ex-girlfriend. Tito 1, who remembers that he was cheated on, gathers courage and asks the president if she is ready to create good memories together. She was obviously going to accept because she was madly in love with him, but when the action started, our protagonist gets nervous because the girl who saved him is watching him, and he apologizes because he still wasn't able to do it. She was aware that he was a shy boy and whispers to him to take a bath while he thinks it over. After a few minutes, our protagonist, while witnessing the landscape, the goddess tells him that in a few minutes everything will return to normal and recommends that he flee. One, who understands nothing, asks who she is, and she says that she is the system administrator of titles named Make, and that she paused several titles to enjoy the skills they bring. For example, the one where he had more than 100 girls attracted to him. In summary, he is handsome by title rank, but he only had it for 3 hours because he is a beginner. If he wants more, he has to pay, and he couldn't miss the chance to be with the president, and like any man would do, he asks how much money it would be to keep using it. But to his bad luck, it is too expensive for just 1 day of use. Seeing that he was sad, she tells him not to worry, that if he doesn't have money, he can go to the lottery and get a free title. Our protagonist ends up trying it, And thanks to that, he gets the title called Master of Mixta-Hink form, and suddenly he receives a notification where 10,000 yuan were deducted. One is confused by what just happened, but Make tells him to read the fine print. He explodes and tells her that she said it was free. She comments that the draw is free, but the usage costs money. He angrily says he will return it, but she mentions that he can't do that because he must keep it for a minimum of 24 hours, so he should enjoy it. He explodes and says he will never use that lottery again. Make mentions that he can't do that because even if he doesn't use it, he will keep the previous title, and it will always cost money, and he will have to work like a donkey to pay for it. Our protagonist, feeling sad for his tragic fate, is comforted by her saying that if he gets other titles, he will be able to make easy money and won't have to worry about being poor anymore. Suddenly, the waifu comes out of the shower, angry, and asks the protagonist what he is doing there, because he is back to normal and no longer attractive. Ashamed about it, she tells him to get out, and he quickly leaves the place. And as they were leaving the hotel, they run into some guys taking a girl to that place. But she quickly flees from them and asks our protagonist for help. Juan was aware that her drink had been spiked with something weird, and he notices that the guys are approaching, but he uses the legendary technique and shouts, "Police!" And as the guys fall for it, he quickly escapes with the beautiful girl. However, they keep following them anyway. After a few minutes, since he was already tired, he hides in a dumpster. Juan immediately notices that the girl is burning up, and since she couldn't bear the intense heat in her body anymore, she asks our protagonist for help. And when they start getting into action, they end up being found by those guys. The guy is furious because they were going to take his girl. Juan gets nervous because there are too many of them, but she tells him not to be afraid, that he's a man, and besides, he has a title. Juan knows she's right and activates his inner alpha male, and like a madman, he was going to beat these guys up. But then there's the big surprise that they have weapons, and he ends up surrendering. The girl tells him to stay calm and activates her special ability. Well, now he gets filled with courage to crush them, but he forgets that he didn't have a weapon to use. The duo, already fed up and feeling like losers, attack, and Juan knew he had no other option. And even if it cost him his dignity, he takes off his belt and, like a pro, starts beating the guys up. The girl calmly remembers that she needed to take the girl to the hospital to be treated. But while helping her up, suddenly a strange object arrives in a luxury car, and the boss of the guys with a serious expression asks what he's doing to his daughter. Juan knew he had messed up when he saw that his daughter was unconscious and him without pants. The furious bald guy tells his men to put that guy to sleep with the fishes. After a while, Juan tells them to let him go, that he saved his daughter from the ruffians. The man yells at him, asking if it was necessary to be without pants, that if he's a man, he should fight him. Our protagonist knew he had no escape and had to activate the ability of his title, but he loses control and was going to annihilate him. What happened was that they were mocking his self-esteem. Juan is a good person, and thanks to his sincerity, the ability starts working, and the girl's father begins to feel that he misunderstood things and asks him to explain everything that happened. Juan, who is an expert at lying, tells him that he's a martial arts master and swore never to attack innocent people. But since he had no other choice, he had to show his power. He activates his ability, producing a great wave of air in his hands, and throws it at the man to scare him and make him believe it, which he manages to do. The man feels relieved because what he said was true, and apologizes to the protagonist for thinking badly of him and thanks him for saving his daughter. After a few hours, soaking wet, they arrive at the man's mansion. Since he is her daughter's savior, she offered him to stay a few days in her humble home. Obviously, our protagonist ended up accepting. After getting out of that relaxing shower, he thinks about enjoying his luck, but Mengele tells him not to celebrate too soon because in an hour he will lose the title, and the only way to keep using it is to buy it again. However, since he was broke, he had to leave before they found out he was a liar. He starts escaping through the balcony of his room and ends up running into the beautiful waifu and is impressed by the succulent scene. Suddenly, his rope breaks, and just as he is about to fall, the beautiful girl saves him, shouting at him to climb up quickly. After a few seconds, the guards notice someone tried to enter the house and ask the young lady Xiao if she saw anything, but she says no. When they leave, she tells Juan he can come out. He obeys, and Xiao, curious, asks why he was climbing the wall in the middle of the night. With a grudge, he mentions he wanted to see her when she changed clothes. Juan obviously denies it, but Xiao feels grateful to her hero and is willing to show him whatever he wants. She asks his name correctly, not wanting to take advantage of the situation, and asks him to calm down. With nothing more to say, he was about to leave, but Xiao stops him and says if he leaves now, they will end up finding him and asks him to stay a while longer. Inside the room, she tells him not to look at her as if she were so thin because right now she is very hungry. Juan understood what she was saying and repeatedly approaches her very affectionately, whispering that when she is not satisfied, she suffers from insomnia and asks him to accompany her to sleep. But all that was a little joke from her, and she asks if he is not curious to know why those men were chasing her. She explains it was because she went to try a delicious meal at a bar to see if she could cure her rare disease. Juan is shocked because she said a gangster went to eat alone at a bar and also about her disease. She, surprised, tells him that her family is not gangsters. When asked how that is possible since her father wanted to send him to sleep with the fishes, Xiao mentions it was just to scare him, and her father and she are culinary gods who offered delicious dishes to the gods. She, the youngest member, was taught to cook from a young age, but as she grew up, she found out she suffered from a rare disease that prevents her from appreciating the taste of food. Not only that, but she also could not inherit the family's hall of delicacies and would starve because she cannot tolerate the taste of what she eats. Therefore, her family is offering $1 million to whoever can cure her. The protagonist becomes thoughtful because if he manages to get the title of culinary god, he can cure her disease. Meng tells him that to use it would cost 50,000, which makes him think because he has no money. However, he quickly realizes he doesn't necessarily have to cure her through food. There are other ways. He promises the waifu that he will help her. The next morning, we see that our surprising protagonist is sleeping, but wakes up due to receiving an unknown call. When he answers, it turns out to be the president scolding him for not going to work. Juan can't believe what is happening, and it turns out he's still... Remember that she was the one who took him to that place where she wanted to do something? That's why she's going to apologize when Juan comes to the office. He thought she already held a grudge against him, so without further ado, he mentions that he's going to resign, thinking she might be afraid and furious. Because of this, she says it's better if he comes to work, but he knew there was no escape. We agreed. She started to feel bad for treating him that way. The scene changes with her telling all the guards that the great master is recruiting students and will teach them many techniques and changes. And if 3 sign up, 1 will be free. Thanks scared him. He did it to get money to keep buying titles. Obviously, the guards who saw such skills will sign up. Juan is happy because he's making money, but suddenly their boss arrives and tells them they've forgotten the oath to the god of food they made when they joined his sect. His repentant disciples apologize to him. He says it's no problem and apologizes to our protagonist. He tells him to be calm, and unexpectedly a butler arrives and hands his boss the legendary black credit card. For those who don't know, this card is only held by the richest people in the world. The boss gives it to the protagonist as thanks for saving his daughter. Tito 1 ends up rejecting it because he did it for justice. The bald man understands what he means and thanks him for everything. But in reality, 1 wanted its power but couldn't say yes because he's an honorable person. We see him watching from afar. After a while, we see the protagonist sad because he didn't earn money and has to work outside, having accepted the card. Suddenly, night falls, and they want to beat up the protagonist. 1 knew it was a big problem because he didn't have a belt and couldn't use his power. Men tells him to calm down, saying that since he did an act of justice yesterday, now he can unleash all his power with his fists. And like any respectable tough guy, he was going to teach them a lesson. The scumbags get cocky and quickly charge at him. Juan, who didn't want to fight, starts taking them down one by one. After a few minutes, we see he gave them a severe beating and tells the boss of the guys what he's saying and that he shouldn't disrespect him again, threatening to cut his face. The guy begs him to stop and says a person like him doesn't deserve to tarnish his reputation as a great master. Juan tells him to calm down, saying it was just a joke. The waifu, with a serious expression, tells the guy that they are fools for fighting and asks if they knew they were beaten yesterday, why they came back. She warns him that if he doesn't tell the truth now, she'll throw his men into the river. The little hero says a fan of Chan paid them 50,000 to kidnap her, the daughter of the culinary gods, but he swears he doesn't know the person. She asks him who the hell the guy is. He says Mimi Chan is a streamer who they were infatuated with because of her beauty, and they're in debt from constantly donating to her. Because of that, one day they got a strange job offer from her, and they begged their protagonist to accept her as their disciple. If they did anything else, they would receive any punishment. And as a sign of sincerity, they would give 50,000. Tito knew the gods were on his side and foolishly said he would take her as one of his disciples and make her a being of light. Zia worries and asks if it's not suspicious to take her as their... Students 1 tells her not to worry, that he will watch over them and do all of this to protect her, the waifu, who, hearing these beautiful words, falls deeply in love. She had a very noble name, but that was pure fiction from the protagonist. The scene changes, and we see Mamishin talking to the blonde guy. She tells him that since he failed the mission, she won't send him any more photos of herself or chat with him. The guy begs her for another chance, saying he will succeed in taking her away, and asks what the problem is with the guy who is with her. The girl, hearing this, tells him not to worry, that she has an idea to turn that guy into her personal slave. The scene changes again, and we see both the protagonist and the waifu waiting for the 24 hours of their title to end. Then one starts researching a title that could help him cure Xiao, and while searching, he comes across a title called Michelin Star, specializing in Western cuisine, and with it, he will be able to captivate people's palates. But it's mentioned that it costs 100,000 a day. Surprised, he asks why it is so expensive. She tells him that because of international recognition, he will be able to gain international skills and become the most famous person in the world. With no other option, he has to buy the Chinese chef title because it is cheaper. The next day, we see our protagonist winning over the hearts of the mansion's kids thanks to being a great cook. While cooking, the aroma reaches Xiao's room, who was asleep. She wakes up to the delicious smell, thinking it was her father cooking, but is greatly surprised that it was our protagonist Wan. Like a true gentleman, he asks her to sit down and enjoy the delicious food he prepared with much love. She blushes because he made that meal especially for her, but Tito, in reality, is thinking about the $1 million he would earn when he cures her illness. The beautiful girl starts tasting the dish that one knew would cure her, but unfortunately, it turns out to be a total failure. Xiao apologizes for eating too quickly, which caused this, but still doesn't feel any taste. One is disheartened because how could it be possible that, even with the Chinese chef title, he couldn't cure her? He tastes his own dish and finds it terrible, but in reality, it is delicious. With a serious expression, he promises to cure her. Xiao is surprised that he is so worried about her, and grateful for everything he has done, ends up giving him a kiss on the cheek. Obviously, everyone is shocked by what just happened, and suddenly, the waifu twists in happiness because she just tasted a delicious lemon touch. One, seeing this, asks what is happening. With a beautiful smile, she declares that she won the $1 million. Our protagonist, shocked by the news and being an honorable man, rejects it, saying he hasn't cured her completely. She tells him that for the first time, she felt a refreshing sweet and sour lemon flavor, and feels that when she is near him, her heart beats a lot and she is sure she is in love with him. Tito 1 doesn't understand anything that is happening right now, but advises her that she is still a student and should not get involved with the jumpster, and as a true gentleman, rejects her confession and recommends that she experience her first love with a SWAT boy. The waifu, who is completely enamored, she begs him to give her a chance, saying she is very mature. Juan was aware that she was partly right about what he did, but as a decent member of society, he refuses, and realizes that thanks to the infatuation, he could already perceive some taste and possibly it is a mental problem. He asks her to please tell him how her illness began. She already knew she had a chance because he cared about her, and mentioned that a year ago, when she was preparing a dish for her father to recognize her skills and inherit the clan according to her family's rules, she couldn't manage it no matter how hard she tried. And one day, her sense of taste suddenly disappeared. Juan knew that this was possibly due to stress, and that he only had to help her get rid of it, and it should return to normal. The scene changes to a guy named So Young working at the mansion, but it was all part of his plan to fulfill Mimi's mission, where he receives a video call from her saying that he is the only one she trusts and knows he will complete the mission assigned to him. So Young, who was crazy about her, would fulfill it at any cost. Returning to the story, they are making the legendary pine and dew cake of the gods. When they finally finish, he asks Xiao to taste it. She's extremely impressed because it looks so shiny. She starts to taste it carefully, and after a few seconds, she apologizes because she still doesn't appreciate any flavor. Juan tells her not to worry, that he knows what is happening. She is very stressed about not meeting her father's expectations, and that's why she lost her sense of taste. But when they manage to make him proud, it will return to normal. So he teaches her some tricks to make the most delicious cake in the world. After an hour, we see that Juan is sure that this dish is a success. But Xiao is still not confident. Tito Juan, a great guy, tells her not to worry, that if she wants, she can take his cake and pass it off as hers. But anyway, both are the same. She thanks him for that, and we see that she falls more in love because he's so good to her. Suddenly, we find that the boss was tasting the legendary wooden dew cake, and both the protagonist and Xiao are nervous to know what he thinks. Suddenly, her father's shirt bursts open because the dish was so delicious, but without hesitation, they ask if she really made it. Nervous, Xiao mentions that she made it with the help of our protagonist. He says that in reality, the work was hers, that the only thing she lacks is a bit more confidence, and that if he doesn't believe it, he should try her dish. And even if he doesn't notice the taste, he will appreciate the different textures. Xiao takes a bit more courage and ends up trying it. The scene changes to her father thanking her for the scene she prepared. Juan says it's no problem but gets nervous because he was talking about marriage and still doesn't feel secure about joining the Gasters family. But he looks on the bright side that he will have a beautiful wife and be rich, so his life wouldn't be so bad. But suddenly, Mimi refuses to let him do it. Juan tells her that he doesn't care if she is a system and ends up hearing her father congratulating his daughter for getting an incredible partner. Xiao, with an expression, makes her father realize that her beloved is a very good man, and she is sure that with his help. Returning to her family in the most prosperous, her father, recognizing her determination, tells her that now she indeed has what it takes to inherit the Shaoli clan. She says she will meet his expectations. After a while, they are on the balcony and he asks how the dinner was. Xiao, with an expression, says it was delicious, but she is happier to be by his side, and although he rejected her once, she will continue fighting for him to accept because he is the only person she thinks about. Tito 1 is considering the possibility of accepting, but Meng arrives telling him he can't do it, and because of this, our protagonist tells him to shut up. Xiao thought he was telling her and gets sad, but despite that, she asks him to wait, that she will be good enough for him and mature enough to be by his side. Later, we see he was angry with Meng because he lost the opportunity to have a beautiful wife, and asks her if she is in love with him. Meng says no, that there are things more important than love, and tells him the reason. It was because she already had another user and he was similar to him, a person with a good heart, and she turned him into a successful person, but one day suddenly he became dark and wanted to take over the world. And because his ideas weren't the same, he hurt her and took away half of her power. Juan, impacted, asks if he has to fight against this guy. She says yes, and besides, to be careful because he has the title of God. That's why she tells him that it is still too early to fall in love and to become strong quickly to defeat him and recover her power. They switch to a nun who turns out to also be a system and tells her user that it is her mission, that she found out Xiao had the Hall of Delights and to bring her immediately. The scared girl says she will do it. A while later, we see Xiao doing a live stream for all her followers. Her fans, who are in love with her, send her a bunch of gifts and bouquets. Juan was tired of watching that live because his subordinate recommended it to him. Juan asked him to do it because it was part of his mission. In the end, Juan accepts and notices that White is throwing a bunch of money envelopes to all her fans, and he is surprised because it was indeed transferred to his account. And suddenly, he ends up receiving the grand prize where she mentions that whoever wins it will have the pleasure of having a date with her in real life. And we see a jealous protagonist because he won the grand prize and wanted to send him to St. Peter. Well, he thought it was because he was very lucky and noticed that she liked him. This teaches him a lesson. Later, he is aware that the fans of that girl are crazy, and as a genius, he thinks that maybe it would be better to sell the prize and earn some cash. Meng feels that this girl is a possessor of the title system and mentions that her previous user had the ability to grant titles to others, and that possibly this girl works for him. But if so, he could also recover some of his power. Juan understands what she says, and the next day we see that our protagonist was waiting for his date, but was a little disappointed because the internet girls are full of filters and should not be the beauties everyone says. Suddenly he ends up arriving at the waifu's place where she greets him cordially, and the protagonist, who is shocked because she is gorgeous, asks embarrassedly where they are going. A moment later, we see that she is in a restaurant and tells him that the title she has is that of the otaku goddess. And not only that, but she possesses great forms of seduction. However, that doesn't matter, and she ends up giving him the title of Zero Man, which means he can kill the conversation with a single word. So without further ado, the action begins as she starts talking about food, trying to make him fall into her web, but he doesn't react to her provocation. In another instance, she tries to achieve an indirect kiss by asking for a sip of his drink, but due to his title, he doesn't flinch. In another situation, she wants to get close to him affectionately, but it results in a total failure where we see romantic situations created to make the protagonist fall into her provocations and turn him into her personal slave. But to add to this, he remains unfazed. While they were walking, he receives a message saying she had been kidnapped. Like a true alpha male, he immediately goes to save her, and as a genius, he knew her location because he put a GPS on her phone. She mentions that she was possibly captured to refine her title as the goddess of food, but if that happens, she will lose her talent forever, and not only that, but her life will also be in danger. He felt guilty because his father made her the heir because of him, and he quickly went to save her. When he finally arrives, he finds a haunted place, but quickly goes to untie his waifu Xiao because a strange guy is coming. Juan suddenly arrives, and a masked guy with a chainsaw yells that no one will escape today. Juan knew he was in trouble because he couldn't defeat him with his title, but being realistic, he tells him his mission is here. And it turns out the guy turns around because he was a fan of hers. She takes the opportunity to run away with Sharp. While doing so, she ends up tripping and spraining her ankle, making her unable to run anymore. Juan, being the alpha male he is, carries his girl in his arms and tells her not to worry. He will get her out of here safely. And thanks to this, she falls more in love with him. A moment later, we see they are hiding because the guy is nearby. But while doing so, he receives a call from Rubicito, and since they were discovered, he distracts the guy so Xiao isn't taken away. We see how quickly the guy reacts because he wanted to send him to St. Peter, and Xiao couldn't stand her beloved helping her anymore and faces the guy, making him fall. Tito Juan still didn't realize that the guy was a beautiful girl and that her weapon was fake. He watches as both girls argue since it was midnight, and he is about to change his title and pick one that he liked. The girl runs towards him and ends up pushing him, causing him to choose the wrong one, and he ends up with the title of the Master of Conditioning. He doesn't know what he'll do, but we see how he hits the girl with a plant whip, and she is fascinated by it. A moment later, she calms down and apologizes, mentioning that she works making accessories for movies and her weapon wouldn't have hurt him. Juan, being a great guy, tells her he'll let her go this time, but next time he won't be so polite. And we see him finally arriving at my mission. She, jealous, ends up saying that she didn't know he liked playing the hero. One, furious, yells that she is despicable because she invited him on the date to capture Xiao. My mission, who is jealous, tells him that she won't forgive him for being indifferent to her, and that girl, if he were to save her immediately, and more than her subordinate, is surprised because he didn't fall for the master's charm. Xiao heard all that, knows that the protagonist considers her very important. Juan, angry, asks her to leave her alone and will do whatever she wants. My villain leaves her alone, but if that girl can be her in a streaming duel, but if she wins, she must give her to him. He tells her to be careful because it could be a trap. Juana says it doesn't matter, and asks Xiao if she is willing to accept the challenge. She knew she couldn't face him and ends up accepting, even though she has never done a live stream. My villain gets furious because she is a novice and dares to underestimate her, and says that in 3 days the competition will be held, and we see her leave with her subordinates. Xiao gets nervous because she has millions of followers and she is a simple novice. Juan tells her not to worry because he will help her. The waifu calms you down because she heard those words. As night falls, we see Juan a bit nervous because he accepted the challenge without thinking and now investigates my mission, and she is very famous. One remembers that Shaba is the one who will compete and asks Men if she wins, she can recover her power. Men says yes, as long as she uses her stamp. Suddenly, they get confused when we talk about recovering the power. It would be Mung's because her user took away half of her super, and he gave some powers to other people. So when the protagonist defeats them, he will be able to recover Mung's previous power. And suddenly there's a knock on the protagonist's door and he goes to open it. It turns out it was Shaba, where she mentions if she can come in because she hasn't been able to sleep. He says, of course. Xiao mentions that on the day of the live stream, she can prepare food or play an instrument or sing if she can. She says not to tell her that if she wants to win, she must do it on the goddess Otaku's own turf. Xiao mentions that she knows classical music and dances, but one says that won't work, and if she wants to win, she has to do those dances like my mission does. Xiao didn't feel confident in dressing like that. One who heard that pulls out his title of Golden Producer, where he promises to turn her into the new goddess Otaku. The next day, our protagonist started first of all by making her put on makeup, also making her practice kawaii dances, and with everything ready, they prepared for the encounter tomorrow. Xiao, who knew her beloved was working hard, prepared a delicious dinner and milk for him so that when he finished, she would help him by giving him a massage in the shower. Later, we see them enjoying the good life. She thanks him because his training gave her a bit more confidence, but she's still a bit nervous. However, he tells her not to be afraid and to do her best, reassuring her that he will always help her. She starts to feel calm because she knows he will always protect her. Finally, the day of the meeting arrives, consisting of 3 rounds with Mamba girls. They present themselves and one of them puts on a show for all their fans. The penalty for losing a round is to rip off a strap from their shirts. She knows it's going to be tough because the first round will be in her territory, but if she wins, she'll have an advantage. So she invests all her money in that victory. The first round is played and she loses in her territory. She also loses the second round, and the last round, called the King of Connections, is activated. She manages to make Shadow, hundreds of celebrities, see her and she's about to win the final encounter. Our protagonist congratulates her because she's very skilled, but the villain doesn't allow that to happen. He activates his trump card, noticing that she's recovering quickly and doesn't understand why. It turns out Mimi-chan had connections with the platform and was manipulating the encounter. Xiao, worried, asks why she doesn't use her money to bring more people. Juan tells her it's not necessary because even if they do, he has contacts with the platform. Xiao sadly tells him they'll lose anyway because they weren't expecting that. Luckily, a girl who was watching the Wayfist detects that my mission is using a title, and she, who can't stand cheating, supports Xiao and starts donating a lot of money, causing the platform to start drowning. Mimi-chan knew she was going to lose and asks her friends for help, but they tell her they can't do anything because the server is paralyzed. One is shocked by what's happening, and we see Xiao winning the encounter. They're happy because they managed to regain the title of the Otaku Goddess,